How can a guy like George Clooney ever feel alone? That was my exact thought the first time I read a line about him never feeling more alone than when he's out in public. I'm Sarah Reed, and today on Golden American Legends, I want to sit with that contradiction. Because at 64, Clooney is still the poster boy for charm, success, and silver fox cool. But his private story? It's tender. It's messy. And yes, parts of it are heartbreaking. Think about it. Oscars, mega hits, a home in Lake Como, and a marriage to one of the most respected human rights lawyers on the planet. On paper, he's bulletproof, but he's admitted to long stretches of insomnia, periods of anxious energy, and years where love felt out of reach. Fame didn't fix that ache. It sometimes made it louder. If you've ever stared at a ceiling at 3 a.m. and asked, "What's wrong with me?" you're already closer to Clooney than you think. Here's where we're going. We'll start with the weight under the spotlight, rewind to his rise, walk through the breakups that left scars, then meet the woman who changed the rhythm of his life, Amal, and the twins who rewired his heart. We'll also talk about why he chose to face the world's worst tragedies up close. Ready to look past the tux? Let's begin. I didn't expect George Clooney's story to smell like fresh-cut grass and small-town TV studios, but it does. He grew up in Kentucky, the son of a local newsman, learning early how the camera loves confidence, but also how quickly it can turn away. He hustled through the 80s with bit parts, the kind you forget until someone airs a rerun at 2 a.m. Then ER happened. Dr. Doug Ross wasn't just a role, it was a rocket. Overnight, America's emergency crush had a stethoscope and a smirk. Here's what I love about that pivot. He leaves a hit show at its peak to gamble on film. The first swings weren't all pretty, Batman and Robin, anyone? But then came Out of Sight, One Fine Day, and the swaggering, irresistible Ocean's 11. Clooney wasn't just famous, he was setting a tone. Smart, funny, unbothered. Awards followed. An acting Oscar for Syriana, producing wins for The Descendants. The checks got bigger, the suits got sharper, and the smile got practiced. But tucked inside that meteoric climb was something easy to miss. The pressure to be the guy who always makes the room feel lighter. Sometimes that's a role, not a life. Keep that in mind, because the next part of his story is where the spotlight starts to sting. I didn't believe it until I heard him say versions of it himself. The loneliest he sometimes felt was at big pug events. Imagine tuxes, flashbulbs, everybody laughing, and in your chest, a quiet thud of, "I don't belong here." Clooney has joked about long, wired nights where sleep just would not show up. Insomnia isn't glamorous. It's pacing. It's replaying old choices. It's thinking you should feel grateful, but somehow feeling hollow. He's hinted that in rough patches, he leaned on late nights and a drink to take the edge off. Nothing scandalous, more like that familiar human reach for anything that quiets the noise. And the media? They love a myth. For years, he was the world's most eligible bachelor, like that was a flex instead of at times a bruise. The truth is, no amount of charisma keeps your heart from getting cracked. You can look like George Clooney and still get dumped, ghosted, or left behind. That's real. I relate to that mask, the smile we wear when the inside is heavy, and it shows up most around his love life. So let's go there, because those endings shaped the man who'd later become a husband and father at 56. Here's a thing I wish someone told me in my 20s. Timing is a beast. Clooney married young Talia Balsam before his life really found its center. It didn't last. He's spoken with a kind of soft regret about that chapter, like he was trying to be a version of himself he hadn't grown into yet. After that came a carousel of public relationships, smart, striking women, and for a while the tabloids made it look like a sport. But breakups aren't headlines to the people inside them. They sting. They linger. Some splits were quiet, some less so. He'd deflect with humor, little quips after a painful end, but you could hear the ache behind the joke. If you've ever made a sharp comment just to hide how hurt you are, you know that move. He once talked about falling apart after a breakup, and I believe him. The insomnia got worse when the love life did. Night keeps receipts. What sticks out to me is the lost time feeling. He said for years he didn't need marriage or kids, and then he realized too late for the old timeline that maybe he did. That's a tragedy you can't photograph. Realizing the life you didn't build is the one you actually wanted. And then, because life loves plot twists, came Amal. Okay, picture this. You've convinced the world and yourself that you're fine alone. And then you meet a woman whose work literally changes lives. Amal Alamuddin walks in with that bright, surgical mind and this gentle gravity, and suddenly George Clooney is rethinking everything. They marry in 2014, Venice is floating behind them, and for once the spectacle matches the feeling. The shift wasn't just romantic, it was structural. He started talking about being grounded, about slowing down, and then the twins arrived in 2017, Ella and Alexander. I remember laughing at an interview where he joked that becoming a dad at 56 meant he just wanted to stay alive long enough to teach them sarcasm. Joy, but also vulnerability. Family makes your heart bigger and more exposed. Were there rumors? Of course, loud ones. That's the tax on being famous and private at the same time. In 2020, when wild stories floated about their marriage being in trouble, he shut it down, called it crazy. What I see now is a couple juggling big missions, her cases, his films, their foundation, and making space for bedtime stories and school drop-offs when they can. Is marriage easy? Please. But by all signs, it's real, and real changes you. Here's a beat that surprised me when I traced his timeline. The deeper his empathy got, the more he stepped into the world's heaviest rooms. In the mid-2000s, Clooney wasn't just cutting checks. He was flying into conflict zones, Darfur, Sudan, pointing cameras where most of Hollywood wouldn't point a plane ticket. He helped launch efforts like Not on Our Watch, testified before Congress, and later co-founded the Clooney Foundation for Justice with Amal. Why does a movie star do that? I think it's two things. First, that good old Clooney empathy, grown from knowing his own pockets of hurt. Second, purpose. When you stand in a refugee camp, the definition of tragedy expands fast. He said versions of this. Seeing people suffer recalibrates your problems. It doesn't erase them, but it gives them scale. They've backed journalists wrongly imprisoned, raised money for refugees, spoken out on crises from Myanmar to Ukraine. And now, as parents, the stakes feel higher. It's not just about being on the right side of history, it's about the world their kids inherit. That mission lens helps explain the man we see at 64, less about red carpets, more about what lasts. So where does that leave him? George Clooney at 64. To me, he looks like a man who's made peace with the paradox. He'll still headline a project or direct something thoughtful, then disappear to cook dinner for the kids or jump on a plane with Amal for a case or a cause. He said the best thing he ever did was become a husband and a father. And still, the older regrets hum softly. The nights he lost to worry, the years he spent convincing himself he didn't need a family, the friends he's mourned. Here's my take. The tragedy in Clooney's story isn't a single dramatic event. It's the quieter kind. Loneliness at the height of applause, a smile that sometimes covered a bruise, the ache of almost waiting too long. But the triumph is just as real. Love arrived, purpose deepened. Sleep, maybe, visits more often. What do you see when you look at him now? An icon, a dad, a do-gooder, a man still healing. Drop me your read in the comments. And if any part of his journey mirrors yours, tell me which part. Because that's the point of stories like this, to remind us that even the brightest lives carry shadows, and that we're not alone in ours. If you felt that tug of war between glamour and grief today, you're my people. I'm Sarah Reed, and this has been Golden American Legends, where we take the shine and turn it over to see the fingerprints. If you want more stories that mix heart, history, and a little Hollywood grit, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I drop new deep dives every week, and your likes and comments honestly guide what I make next. Quick favor, who should we unpack next? An actor everyone thinks has it easy, but doesn't? Or a music legend who rebuilt after a fall? Tell me below, and I'll chase the receipts. Thanks for watching. Thanks for caring, and hey, tonight, may your pillow win the fight with insomnia. I'll see you in the next one.